In my last video, your comments were loud and clear. Frustration, dismay and anger at Rolex's so-called waitlist process. Story after story of bias, inconsistency and outright discrimination flooded in, with many of you feeling turned off by a brand that once symbolized class and elegance. What's wrong with Rolex's current system, and perhaps more importantly, what could replace it? Is it time for transparency, innovation and maybe even a complete overhaul of how these coveted timepieces are allocated? And of course, with Rolex's shift towards a more boutique focused sales model, can we expect these changes more sooner rather than later? Welcome back. Rolex waitlists then. What is the problem? Well, really, we've got to look at this from two different angles. One, the problem that the consumer has with it, and number two, the issues that that's creating for Rolex, the brand, moving forward. The process that we've been used to for a long time, as you can see from those comments in the last video, is entirely opaque and subjective, which is basically a process that prioritizes high-spending repeat buyers, celebrities, of course, and maybe even just personal favorites. And this is the other big problem with the waitlist process, is that the process doesn't really exist. There is nothing uniform across the entire international spectrum that Rolex have imposed on their authorized dealers. It varies from authorized dealer to authorized dealer. So the second issue with that this is creating, of course, is a prospective client base which are becoming totally disenfranchised with the brand and not even bothering to go to an authorized dealer to buy a Rolex brand new, and they're just turning to the grey market because now there is a stigma attached to the brand that it is a dirty, unknown, shady process to source your brand new Rolex. That isn't good for Rolex the brand, and going forward, believe me, it's certainly something that the Gen Z generation could not be arsed with. We do know that Rolex are shifting towards a more boutique focused retail sales model. With their acquisition of Bucherer, they take control of a massive proportion of the authorized dealer network, essentially cutting out that authorized dealer middleman. Now this gives them great opportunities to be able to impose a standardized waitlist process or allocation process that replaces waitlists. So the question really is, what could be that golden allocation process that could kill both birds with one stone? Solution number one, and it's quite simple: go digital. Now, I did in a recent video talk about a new patent that is leaked where Rolex intend to implement a chip into their guarantee cards that they issue with the sale of every Rolex. Now, this is going to be backed up with an online system which sort of can be logged with the details of that original owner if the original owner decides to do so. Now, this is a first step that we're seeing towards digitalization for Rolex. We've seen it from other brands. Breitling do it quite heavily with their new watches, Tag Heuer relying on a blockchain network. But if Rolex make the move into this digital space, there's a lot of opportunities that they could take up here. The first aspect of this solution could, of course, be an online registration portal. Customers could register directly on Rolex's website or app, specifying the desired model and configuration. This could go even further to embolden the transparency in the process, where maybe customers could see what position in the queue they are. We're used to now as consumers getting updates about when a parcel will be delivered. We're expecting next day delivery, we're expecting things quicker, and if it can't be done quickly, then we expect to be informed at every step of the process. Retailers like Amazon have created that new psyche amongst consumers that knowledge is power and that we need to be kept in the light about everything. Now, the second proposed idea is basically implementing a policy which could run alongside the current waitlisting model and go quite some way to cleaning up the effectiveness of that model, and that is a locals first policy. Now, we know that Audemars Piguet adopt a very similar policy. I wanted to put my name down for a code 1159 at the Geneva boutique. Now, that's a watch which you can quite easily pick up. However, because I am Genevan and my local store would be the London branch, I wasn't allowed to be put on a wait list for that particular model. So the problem with Rolex is that current lists prioritize celebrities and high-value clients globally, which alienates local buyers who are loyal to specific boutiques. And this is also important for rooting out flippers or rooting out people who really are spreading their octopus tentacles across many boutiques. Now, I know of people who have played the waitlist game quite well. And these guys who get their hands on the big watches that everybody wants have been doing it for many years. And they certainly don't have just one connection with one boutique that is their local boutique. No, in many cases, they have contacts within 3, 4, or 5 boutiques. Now, that wouldn't be allowed to happen with this policy and would go some way to eliminating people on wait lists who have no right or deserve to be there if they live hundreds of miles away. Making it specific to a local boutique could make wait lists shorter. The third proposed solution is a shift towards a centralized allocation process. Now, just for context, we know Rolex have acquired Bucherer. This is a stealth move to really gain control of the authorized dealer network and, in essence, turn them into boutiques. Now, I do believe over the next 10, 20 years, we will see even more acquisition of authorized dealers losing their licenses. Now, this would allow an environment where there could be a centralized allocation process. So if they were to tie this in digitally with the digital model I suggested before, where you could choose which particular watch you wanted online, Rolex then can send that particular watch when it's ready directly to the authorized dealer. At the moment, we have a model where there is a set arbitrary allocation of Rolexes dependent on the size of the authorized dealer and how many sales they achieve every month. And that means that there is a great deal of AD bias there. ADs are pushing Rolexes on customers that customers don't want. So that also is creating an experience which is not luxury, it's quite the opposite. It's creating a model where if you can buy the 31mm women's piece that they can't shift, that they've been allocated for that particular month, you may get a Rolex Submariner 2 or 3 months down the line. Now, that motivation for authorized dealers to push upon you stuff that you don't want is driven by the fact that they have a select few watches that they really do struggle to sell normally. If there wasn't that allocation system where if you don't sell your watches that we give you, we won't give you the same allocation next year, so they're motivated and incentivized to sell them whichever way that they can, then customers would get the watches that they want or they would get nothing at all. Solution number 4 is really an idea that tackles the cause rather than the effect. The effect is that wait lists are dirty and that they're too long and that they're subjective. Why are they too long, though, is the question. Why are there so many people on a wait list for a Submariner, a Daytona? A lot of them will just want the watch, of course, but there is also this presence, and has been for a very long time now, of flippers. So what could you do to prevent flippers in the first place? Well, you could implement a system of blacklisting, quite similar to what Patek Philippe do and have successfully upheld for many years. Now, the big problem with blacklisting is that, of course, for Patek Philippe and for rare pieces that Patek Philippe make, I think they only make 50,000 pieces a year, as opposed to Rolex's 1.4 million pieces a year, is that for Patek Philippe, this is quite easy to enforce because there aren't as many of them out there. So if a rare Patek Philippe pops up, which has just been sold at an authorized dealer on eBay, that authorized dealer can have it brought to their attention quite easily. However, on eBay, there are hundreds of Rolexes being uploaded every day, unworn, in new condition, and it's very difficult for ADs to have the time to police that. So the real question is, how could Rolex blacklist flippers effectively? They could do it through adoption of a digital certificate attached with that watch, which could be based on a blockchain system. If you're not familiar with the blockchain, basically it is a digital system where it makes it easy to trace resale history, and therefore buyers with frequent flipping history could be disqualified or blacklisted from future purchases. The idea then, if a digital ownership certificate and blockchain could be used to track the movements of a watch in its life or in the first year or two of its life, it could clear up the industry of those on waitlists purely with the motivation to make money, which in turn would reduce or shorten waitlists down to just the people who want the watch to wear. And the fifth and final solution that I have is one that seems completely obvious. So obvious that it boggles the mind as to why Rolex didn't implement it many years ago. And that is a lottery-based system. Now, you don't really need me to explain this, but basically you would register your interest for a watch, put your name down for it, perhaps go through a verification procedure online, register interest for a specific release window. Winners would then be randomly selected and offered the chance to purchase the model. Now, this is something that brands already do. Smaller brands like MB&F have implemented it quite successfully. For their Mad 1 line, for example, they have specific batch releases of that product. And if your name gets drawn out of the hat and you're lucky enough to win that watch, you can then decide whether you want to proceed with the purchase. This is such a simple and cheap solution that could be centralized and would remove all elements of bias and the opaqueness of the process. It's very simple to understand. Customers can't feel hard done by for the fact that somebody else has won, because it's based on nothing but pure luck and luck alone. But let me know what your thoughts are, guys, down in the comments below. Which one of those proposed 5 solutions do you prefer? Thanks very much for joining me. Please go check out vinnyfrancis.com, and until the next time, cheerio.